Welcome everyone to class 10. Could you believe, Sean, class 10 of Lawfare's hacking class? I am joined, as always, by the lovely, amazing, and talented Sean O'Brien. And we are going to pop some boxes today, or pop the same box over and over again and do some web exploitation. So the plan for today is I am going to continue with Metasploit. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And then Sean is going to be doing web application exploitation using, I think the first session will be SQL injections, and then the second will be cross-site scripting. So lots of hacking today. We've been training for this moment. So let's get to it. Okay, so remember what we talked about last week. We talked about the kill chain, where you engage in reconnaissance, and then you try to see what ports are open, what services are vulnerable, and then you attack them. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get into Metasploit, but we're just going to remember that we're going to start the database. So service PostgreSQL start, and I'm going to type in my password. And then the next thing is you have to sudo msf db init. So we're going to initialize the databases. Okay. And we are going to get into Metasploit through msf console at the command line. Okay. Because I thought ahead, I have the scans from last week, which I redid, and so first is to see the hosts of my local network, my Apple TV, my iPad, my iPhone. This is my Kali machine, which I'm on right now, 192.168, 254, 142. And we are and then our Metasploitable machine is 254, 143. Okay, and this is my router. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the services database, and I just want the 192, 168, 254, 143, and that's the Metasploitable machine. And it's good. This tells me all the services that are running on Metasploitable. And as you can see, there are lots of open ports. Just to remind you what we did last class, we're going to do it very quickly. There's the Metasploitable root shell on port 1524. So I'm going to netcat 192, 168, 254, 143 at port 1524, and that should give me a root shell, which it does, which, who am I? Root. Okay, so that was one way of getting in. Here's another way of getting in. We searched for VSFTPD, because this is the FTP client that is running on Metasploitable. It turns out that there is a exploit that we can use. So we're going to go use exploit Unix FTP VSFTP, show options. We have to set the R host. So I'm going to set R hosts to 192, 168, 254, 143. Okay, now that's set. I'm going to run the exploit, and that should give me another shell, a root shell, found shell. And now I have a shell, LSLA, and who am I? Root. Okay, so we are now in Metasploitable two different ways, but these are a little too easy. Let me abort this session. and go back. And I want to look at 192.168.254.143. And I look, and I'm just going to pick something at random, which is not really at random because I did this beforehand. But when I see this thing here, distributed on port 3632, there is a distributed compiler. And let me see if I can if I can exploit that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search the database and see if there is distributed compiler exploit. Wow, look at this. There is a distributed compiler exploit, and it's an excellent one. So I'm going to try to use it. Exploit Unix miscellaneous distributed compiler. Okay, I've now loaded it, and I want to see what I have to set, show options. So I have to set my R host, my remote host, and that's going to be my Metasploitable machine, which I'm going to set to 143. And then I have to set one more thing here. I have to set the payload. So what happens in hacking lots of times when you have an exploit, the exploit will get you in to the machine you're trying to get into, but you can carry with it a payload. And the payload, sometimes if the exploit won't give you a shell, the payload will give you the shell. So I'm going to set the payload to be CMD, what is it? Unix, I think it's Unix, and I think it's reverse. Okay, yeah, so now if I show options, it says that my target is now the Metasploitable machine, and I have a payload set, which will give me what's called a reverse shell. That instead of a regular shell is where your attacking machine sets up a connection with the victim machine. A reverse shell is when it goes the opposite way. The victim machine reaches out to the attacker machine to connect to it. And reverse shells are very useful because if you're reaching out from inside the victim machine, you're past generally the firewalls. So it's a pretty good thing to get a reverse shell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exploit, and hopefully it's going to give me a shell, a reverse shell. Let's see, let's hope that works. Okay, look, it worked. I popped the box, and I am going to clear. I am going to see where I am. PWD, I am in the temporary directory. Who am I? Oh, wait a second, I'm only the daemon. I'm only a daemon. That means that when I exploited this Metasploitable, I did it at a low privilege level. The other ones I did root. Now I'm daemon, and daemon will have low privileges. And what I'll have to do here is I'll have to escalate privileges, and Metasploitable has various ways of escalating privileges. I'm not going to do that. The reason why I'm not going to do that is because we don't have time. So I'm going to abort that, and I'm going to look for another way to pop this box, 192.168. I'm going to look again at the... I hope you can tell that I love playing with this. I just love playing with Metasploit. It's just so much fun. Let me see. Okay. We have a Samba here, a Samba service running on 445. Samba is for sharing resources, like when you have a shared drive, that will use Samba. Okay, so let's see if we can exploit Samba. This is 3.0.20 version. So let me clear search Samba 3.0.20, I think it was. Look at that. We have an excellent exploit for Samba, so we can try to exploit Samba. Hopefully I'll have high privileges for this. If not, I'll have to look somewhere else or escalate privileges. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use it. Let me load it in Samba user script. Okay, that's loaded. Show options. See what I need to set. I need to set R hosts, and I already have my payload is set, so I don't have to set the payload. So let me set the R host to my Metasploitable machine. So show options. Okay, it looks like we are all set. Okay, let me run this. Hopefully it'll work. It's going to try to start a shell. Oh, it started a shell. Look at that. Okay, let me see. Okay, where am I? I'm at PWD. I'm at root. Okay, and let me see what privileges I have. Who am I? I am at root. Okay, this is great. Okay, now because I'm at root, I have a lot of privileges. Now the question is, what do I do? Now I can do lots of things at this point, and I'm going to do a couple of them. One thing I could do is, because I'm root, is I can change passwords. I can change some user's password to some password that I know of, and that way I can get back in if I wanted to. But that's a noisy way to do it, because if that user tries to log in, they won't be able to log in because I changed their password. So another way to do it is I can set up my own backdoor. So we already exploited two backdoors already, the VSFTP backdoor and the root Metasploitable root shell on port 1524. I am going to set up my own backdoor that's going to just be listening on the Metasploitable machine, and that I will be able to invoke whenever I want to from the Kali machine. How do I do that? Well, I'm going to use this thing that we've been using, netcat, and I'll keep. We'll put all these commands in the GitHub repo. But I'm going to start a client that's going to listen on port 1234. So I'm going to go listen verbose on port 1234. Okay, and I am going to, and what it says is that if some machine calls this machine on port 1234, it will execute a shell. So now it's listening. So now Metasploitable, I set up a backdoor that is listening on port 1234. Now I am going to right now background this. This is a cool thing that you can do in Metasploit. What this will do is it'll allow me to go back to the Kali machine with all my connections intact. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control Z, and it's going to say background session, and I'm going to go yes, and it's going to take me back to Kali. Now, right now, the backdoor is still listening on port 1234. So I can get that root shell whenever I want from Metasploit or wherever I want to, but I'm in Kali right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go netcat nc, and I'm going to go 192.168.254.143, and then I'm going to put in the port number, which is 1234, because that's what the port I just set up. And if this works, I should be able to get in directly to Metasploitable. And who am I? Root. Okay, ifconfig. I am in Metasploitable. Okay, so I set up our backdoor. I was able to open the backdoor from Kali. this is the way of establishing persistence. I will show other ways of establishing persistence.
Have we lost Scott? I've got to do a little housekeeping anyway for a few seconds here, so let me not waste the time just because we have a lot of stuff to do today. I may have to just get started here. Okay. Let's give Scott another 30 seconds or so, and I'm also going to drop into the chat. Oh, hey, Scott's back. Yeah, so that was amazing work, though, Scott. Yeah, did amazing stuff. I just want everybody here to know, like, that's what you would learn in a penetration testing. Like the people who make Kali Linux teach that stuff. So it's really important, all the stuff about kill chain. If you want a career in cybersecurity, in penetration testing, this kind of thing, that's the meat and potatoes kind of stuff you want to go after. So it's really cool stuff. Okay, now I'm going to be doing something that's a little more of a sidebar, and I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so we've done attacks on vulnerable machines, right? In this case today using the kill chain, but like dialing into other servers, basically finding shells that, using an exploit to do a reverse shell, et cetera, et cetera. That's all incredibly cool stuff. We've also done some network attacks, right? DNS, messery, making sure that somebody on a local network in, a coffee shop accidentally goes to your fake Facebook site and you record all their information. That's all really cool, but there's another class of attacks, and there's another sort of tool set for your hacking career that you should be aware of. And these are client-side attacks that take advantage of holes in web applications. As Scott said at the start of the session today, the two things I'm going to go over are SQL injection, which has to do with databases. That's where we're going to start now. And then cross-site scripting, which I'll get into later. Okay, you all, I hope, can see this screenshot. This is a database, and I'm sure quite a few of you have had to deal with databases in your life. This is a relational database screenshot just showing, hey, here's one table, and it has primary keys that relate to another table, et cetera, et cetera. Glorified set of spreadsheets. This is how information has been stored on computers since really people started using computers, right? At least for work. But behind all of this, there's also, I don't know if you want to call it a programming language. I guess it technically is SQL, right? And structured query language. And SQL is the way in which commands are structured that, add information to a database, pull information from a database to read it, delete information from a database, right? And that language has a syntax, has a structure, just like when we do commands in the command line, right? And we, put a space where we shouldn't put it, or an apostrophe or a slash in the wrong place, etc. We can break that command, right? And the output we get in our command line, in our terminal, which I'm sure all of us have experienced by this point, can be unexpected. That kind of unexpected output inside of a web application that's pulling from a database, right, can create a vulnerability, that can be an exploit, right, can be exploited by a hacker. And that's because, and forgive this diagram, it's one of the worst on the subject I've found. I used to have a simpler one, and I swear I'll dig it up. But that's because most web applications use something called the LAMP stack in this case, or some other database stack. And what that means, LAMP stands for, in this case, usually Linux, Apache, MySQL, and then a programming language like PHP, Python, or Perl. You'll see it here. They tried to make the acronym easy for you to see, LAMP. But, the world's very complicated these days. Web apps have come a long way in the last 10 to 20 years. So it's not just this, that the way that web apps work. What's important to understand, though, is that you have the application. The application polls from a database using one of these scripted languages, right? Scripting languages. Today, we're going to look at a problem with PHP in a web app, and that's very common. It's still being used, for example, as a heavily modified version, but as the backend for Facebook, which obviously is a pretty massive and, huge site. And what we're going to do is what's in this comic here. So this is from XKCD again, the nerd comic. You all can read it on your own. I'm actually going to pop that into the chat rather than explain it, because nobody wants a lecturer to explain a comic to them. But we're going to basically do what this child in this comic did. Okay, so let's do it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go out to a buggy app that has SQL injection problems. I'm going to pop into the chat again. A little bit of a peek behind the curtain. The notes that Scott and I put together for class. This has in it all the SQL commands that I'm going to run today, all the cross-site scripting commands that I'm going to run today, and the URL that we're about to go out to for SQL injection. This is a buggy web app. I'll paste that into the chat as well, the full URL. At VulnWeb. And there's a lot of examples like this on the internet. This one is meant to be vulnerable, just like Metasploitable is meant to be vulnerable. And it's supposed to mimic like a shopping cart for like CDs or streaming music, okay? So, at VulnWeb, there's this site. Let's pretend it's a shopping cart. And you have these three artists here. When I mouse over, you'll see in the lower address bar there, it says artist.php artist equals 1, artist equals 2, artist equals 3. This is the kind of structure that these applications have, right? Everything that comes after the question mark is basically a command. It's requesting information in something called a get string from the PHP-based application, and then that PHP script goes out to this MySQL database and grabs the information. Okay, this is all dummy, of course, with lorem text, lorem ipsum, but let's see if we can break it. So how do you test these things to break them? Well, you just throw a bunch of characters basically in the URL bar. That's one way to do it, and see what happens. I'm going to try putting an apostrophe in, because we know apostrophes and quotation marks and so on are used for the barrier of information in the syntax of these programming languages. So if I put an apostrophe in and I hit enter, oh, look, we get an error, and it says MySQL fetch array, right? So this is very similar to what Scott was doing with Metasploit, but it's kind of like the web appy like version of it. You kind of poke around and find holes and see what's going on. So we know there's a problem with this app, and the problem is that the app is not sanitizing the inputs, right? It's not making sure that when you put an apostrophe in, that it replaces that, or finds a way to process that, encode that, that's not breaking the application. Okay, so we now know that happens. Well, another thing you can do is you can put in a negative number often. And if you put a negative number and it's not a well-structured database or scripting language around the database, it can break the application as well. So let's try that, -2. Okay, now we get nothing. But that's actually better than the error, because it means we got some output to the browser and it didn't fully break the application and throw an error, which means we can now take this string, right, in the URL bar, and we can use it to try to pull some information from the database. And we're going to use, again, those pre-canned examples that I pasted into the chat today. I'll make sure this will end up in GitHub. But we're going to just paste some SQL in after this URL. So you'll see I just pasted in this huge union select from a table name from the information schema of the database. This is a command, right? A SQL command. And I just pasted it after the actual URL here. I'm going to hit enter. Oh, and look, I pulled the table names of the database. Artists, carts, category featured, users, right? That's the kind of thing we want, just like we always want user information when we're trying to, figure out how to break into something. Okay, so now that we know there's a users table, let's also see if we can get the columns, right? Let's figure out what's in that users table and the other tables as well. I'm going to paste in another SQL command. And now we have the columns of the database. And this has dumped out all the columns, but that's cool too. I mean, this is a peek behind the database that they don't want us to see. And look, we've got a username, we've got a pass, which is probably password, we got CC, maybe that's credit card information, we've got an address, email, name, phone, right? That's the information we can now try to dig for. And using our knowledge of SQL, again, just like with everything hacking, people can just find this stuff pre-canned online. That's what I did today. I'm going to paste in another SQL command. This one pulls the username, right? Uname. Okay. The uname for artist 2 is test. And I could do this for artist 1, 2, and 3 because I know they exist, right? Let's get something more interesting than the username. Let's get the name. Right? We know that's in there. Okay, Smirt. That's an interesting name. All right, whatever. But that's what that person put in for their username or for their real name. Let's get the phone number. Man, please. Let's see. Did I screw that one up? Maybe there is none for that. Let's try artist 1. Let's try artist 3. I swear one of these folks has a... we're still pumping out some junk data. All right, let's get away from the phone number. Who cares? Let's go to email. It's kind of still giving me that information, so there might be something wrong here with my string.
Is there? It looks like you have -2 rather than just
yeah,
2.
but that's what's actually sort of breaking the select.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
But let me try a more important string. Let's see if we can get the credit card information. Oop, that's breaking. We'll get there. I just demoed it, Scott, so therefore most of it will work, right? It's still pumping out this Smirt information. Interesting. I wonder why it's doing that. I wonder if that's a caching issue in my browser. Oh, nope. It gave me a password. Cool. So the password for this user is test, and the username is test. That's not very wise. And this is an example, of course, why we talked so much about hashing passwords and making sure that passwords are hashed in databases, right? They should be not spit out information like this, because if you have a hole in a web application, you can do something like this. Let's see if we can I really want to get credit card information from someone. Let's try user 1 CC. No. I'm wondering if somebody messed with this application before, because this is open to the open web to screw with, before I demoed today. Because I just was able to pull credit card information earlier, I swear. Okay, doesn't matter. The point is, you can manipulate a simple address bar, dig around like I did, and you'd be surprised how many applications do this. This is also an example, of course, of how most web applications were written before, especially the early 2000s, right? And even into today, there's a lot of legacy stuff. And in many places where you're fast shipping apps and maybe not teaching people some of the fundamentals of security, you also find this. One thing to note, for example, is that when Aadhaar, the biometric system, was rolled out in India, I worked with a penetration tester to test some pretty big Aadhaar apps. And there were millions and millions of records, if not billions, because we're talking 1.2, 1.4 billion people, give or take, in the Aadhaar system in India. You've got the massive amount of records that were exposed via things like this. So it does happen. It's a real deal. And I'll stop for there now. Take it away, Scott.
Thank you so much, Sean. Sean's going to go back to exploiting web apps using a different kind of attack after I go, and then next week we'll talk about why all these things work, why hacking works. But that'll be next week. Let's do some more actual hacking. So one of the things that before my internet went down, I had set up a listener on Metasploitable. Right now I'm on Kali, so let me just go NC listen verbose port 1, 2, 3, 4, and then once you get a connection, spawn a shell. Okay, that's what I put in on Metasploitable. I'm not going to run that here because this is not going to be the listener. This is not going to be the client. This is going to be the server. So I'm going to call out. I'm sorry. This is going to be the client. The other one's going to be the listener. Okay, the server. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go NC 192.168.254.143.1234. Now, this is going to call out to the listener, and if this was done correctly, it should open the back door. Oh, okay. I am now, I'm not root. I am MSF admin. MSF admin is the username that I used. I didn't want to go through the whole issue of running the exploit again, so I did it directly from the Metasploit machine. So this is a way to get in directly to the MSF admin user on the Metasploitable machine by setting up a listener. I'm going to exit this. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that exploit again that I used before, the Samba exploit. Okay, which gave me root multi Samba user map script. Okay, I'm going to set this to the R host to be Metasploitable, and let me show options. Let me see if okay, everything seems to be set up. Let me run this. Hopefully it'll get me root. Okay, who am I? Root. Okay, I am now root on Metasploitable. Okay, I popped that box. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I could set up another listener, LVP 1, 2, 3, 4. I could do that again. I don't want to do that again. What I want to do is I want to establish greater persistence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a username, a user called hacker. Add user hacker. Okay, you know what? Let me delete hacker and then start it again. Clear, because I already had it there. Go add user hacker. I'm going to make my Unix the password tour. Okay. Okay. So hopefully I can go, I will have a home directory, I'll have a hacker directory in my home directory. Let's see if that happened. Okay, good. Okay, clear LSLA. Okay, let me just remove username because the TXT. Okay. See, I tested this before. Okay, so we now have basically an empty directory for hacker. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the usernames to this subdirectory, to this directory, this home directory. Remember, it's the password, Etsy password, which has the usernames, and I'm going to put it to username.txt. Okay, let me see if that worked. Cat username.txt. Okay, so that worked. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to background this session and I'm going to go back to Kali. So I'm going to go Control Z, background it. And now I am back at uh, my Kali machine. Okay. What I want to do is I'm going to run FTP. I'm going to file transfer protocol, and I'm going to transfer FTP. I'm going to transfer username from Metasploitable to my Kali machine. And that way, when I get the usernames, I'm going to process it, and then I'm going to try to crack the passwords on Metasploitable. Okay, so how do I do that? I'm going to go FTP hacker at 192.168.254.143. Password tour. Okay, let me just see. Okay, I have username. Okay, so let me exit FTP. Cat username.txt. Okay, I was able to, I'm going to check to make sure. Okay, I was looking to see if my internet connection went down because everything's going so well. I figured my internet connection had to have gone down. Okay, so I was able to transfer the usernames from Metasploitable to Kali. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to input these usernames into Metasploitable and try different kinds of passwords to see if I can get the passwords to some of the services that are running on Metasploitable to get more, to get greater access. Okay. Now the problem is that there's all this junk that you see, there's all this junk here, and I just want the usernames. And I could put this into Nano and just get rid of everything but the username. But like everything in Linux, Unix, there's a command that you can use that will cut out everything past the first word. Okay, and that is called cut. Okay, let me get this. I have this cut. Field 1, cut everything after field 1, username.txt, and so you see it cut everything except for the first word, which is the username. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to redo this, and I'm going to pipe it. I'm going to redirect it into another file called username. Okay, now let me go cut username, cat username, see what's in there. Oh, good. Okay, now this has all the usernames in the Metasploitable machine. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a password cracking program, which it's in Kali. We haven't used it. We use John the Ripper. I'm going to use Hydra. And by the way, I suggest that you play around with Kali when you're thinking about your hacks, because there's lots of different tools that we haven't used that are available. I'm going to use Hydra, and what Hydra will do is it will log in using the username file. And what it'll do is it will try different kinds of combinations. Again, we will have this in the GitHub repo 192.168.254.143. Now, what this will do is it will try to log in using the username and then try different combinations of the username as the password. And so it's going to run, and hopefully it'll find some passwords associated with different services and users. Oh, look at this. Okay, we found out Oh, look at all this stuff. Okay, so for MSF admin has password MSF admin. FTP has PTF is the kind of, they just reversed it. Um, also, Postgres has the same username for its password. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to SSH into MSF admin using using the password I just discovered here, 168.254.143. That did not work. That should have worked. Trust me, it works. Okay. What I'm going to do right now is I already have a connection to the Metasploitable machine. I know that because if I type in sessions, let me clear this and type sessions, it shows that I still have a shell running from Kali to Metasploitable. Okay, so I can use that shell to run something called Meterpreter. Now, Meterpreter is extremely powerful. It is what's known as a post-exploitation tool. It's the thing that can turn on your webcam, can turn on your audio, can do keyloggers. If you can get Meterpreter up and running, you really own the other machine. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So first thing is we are going to load the thing that allows you to go from a shell to Meterpreter. So I'm going to go use post, that's for post exploitation, multi manage shell to Meterpreter. Okay, show options. Okay, I have to set the session. So I am going to set session to 1 because that's what's going to convert the shell to Meterpreter, session 1. Okay, and I am going to exploit, and it should create another session. Okay, so let me go sessions. What? Post exploit Meterpreter session 2 closed. Let me try. Let me try that again. No. This should have worked. What I'm going to do is I am going to exit, and I'm going to run this again. Exit. Okay. Back. I'm going to get my shell back up running. Let me get the Samba script. Okay. I am going to set the remote password. Actually, I should already have it. Should already set. Set options. Show options. Okay, it's already set. Let me exploit. I'm going to background it again, then go back and then see if it'll work. The problem is that what you'll find is that if you run these exploits over and over again, sometimes the ports stay open and you can't do it. So I'm going to now background sessions. I have another shell running, so I'm going to try to set the Meterpreter exploit to session 3. Hopefully that will work. Okay. Okay. Show options. I'm going to set session to 3. Okay, it's set to 3, show options. Let's see, make sure I did it. Okay, now I'm going to go exploit, and hopefully it'll give me an interpreter shell. Okay, I think it worked. Sessions. Okay, so I have now an interpreter shell running on session 4. To get that up and running, I go session. Is it session or sessions? Sessions -I 4. Or was it 3? Well, let's see if we did 4 or 3. Christ. I think I was supposed to do it at session 3.
I'm pretty sure it was 3, yeah.
Yeah. Let me try it again. Show options, set session 3, and then I'm gonna exploit. Okay, so this is sessions. That's 5, 4, 3. So I am going to sessions I 3, right, Sean? It's 3. It should be 3.
It is 3, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Let's hope this works. It was going. It was working. It was going so well.
It's okay.
Okay. Well, it worked 7 times earlier today. So we'll put down the commands in the GitHub repo. When you run it, it will work.
Cool.
Okay. I'm. Let me just. I'm gonna just try to. Okay. Sessions I5. Oh my God! It worked. Okay. Here's the interpreter shell. Okay. We have the interpreter shell. Okay. This is very exciting. Look at this. Okay. So here, these are all the things you can do with the interpreter. You can do ordinary kind of command line stuff. You can, this is all the stuff we've seen before, but then you have cool stuff like you get to create shells, you get to kill processes, but then you get to use the webcams. If there's a webcam, you can turn that on. The microphones, you can turn those things on. If you look at webcam list, it turns out there are no webcams that Metasploitable is running. But if you do mic list, you will see that there's actually 2 microphones that are being run in Metasploitable. And you could then start the microphone and record them. And this would be a great thing to do for your hack. Anyway, this is incredibly powerful. Once you get the interpreter shell, you really can just control the victim machine that you're attached to. Basically, you own it. Okay, so thank God that worked. I'm going to get out of here. Sean, over to you.
Incredible. And just as a reminder for everybody, yeah, that interpreter shell, that's really where you want to get if you want to do interesting hacks. And that whole microphone thing is huge. And another thing I'll just say real quickly, like running all those sessions, going through all that live is, it's very daring. That's why you don't see a lot of folks do it that way. But also it's the reason that hackers lay in wait and take their time and run one exploit at a time, not necessarily running a bunch of different stuff all at once, the way that we try to do it. you're going to run into errors, you're going to run into problems, you're going to have to get around stuff and troubleshoot on your own as a hacker. And if you were attacking a machine, you'd find a way in, and then you'd take your time slowly going down the list, basically, as you needed to. Okay, I'm going to be real quick here, and I've got to do cross-site scripting, or I hope you will all enjoy it. Cross-site scripting is a second way, and a very common way, that web applications can be sort of violated. SQL injection grabs information from the application that's poorly sanitized. Folks who have last names like O'Brien with an apostrophe in them know this very well. When you enter information that's got bad syntax, you can break the application, but you can also manipulate it, right? I'm going to link to this Wikipedia, as I said before, and John Hawkinson here reminded us. Wikipedia's got good information about cross-site scripting and many other things about all the stuff we've talked about. So please check them out when you're kind of confused or need an explanation on how these things work. Okay, I'm also going to paste in the site that we're going to use for reflective cross-site scripting. And I'll paste in the class notes again. If you want to skip down to the section that says cross-site scripting, that's where we're going to be. Okay, cool. So we've got a web app here. It's purposefully vulnerable, but pretend this says, Yale.edu on the top, like that fake site I did a few weeks ago, or, Facebook or something else. And imagine that it doesn't sanitize HTML tags. Now, HTML is the markup language that web pages are made out of. So I can put a heading in with these brackets, and I can say, hey, I just injected this into the site for the browser. Exclamation point. I, of course, have to close my tag because good HTML syntax is important. I click search. And wow, look, it just spits it out, reflects it. That's why this is called reflected or reflective, depending on how you want to call it, attacks. Okay, now that's obviously a silly thing. Why would you do such a thing? Well, what if you do something a little more interesting? I'm going to paste in some examples here. What if I wanted to, hey, I'm loading an image from somewhere else on the internet, right, in the middle of a website, right? And now if I were to share this URL, see this query URL again after the question mark, this query in here, all of this information, I could take this, I could put it in a phishing email, I could have that be in a link, and you click out and suddenly you think that somebody's hosting a Doge image or a Doge image that they don't know about. What if you wanted to Rickroll somebody? Hey, you could do it. You could insert a YouTube Rickroll video. Great. What if you wanted to, insert a fake version of Google? You can insert a website inside another website using an iframe. Look at that, fake version of Google. This is a crappy version that's purposefully used for quote-unquote pranks on the internet. That's why they have that pop-up. But they have that pop-up precisely for the reason that we are using it. It could scare people or trick people into thinking that they're going out to a Google site. What if I inserted a button? So let's say I wanted to insert a button and it says click here, right? And I click search, and now it has a button that says click here. And what if I go even further and I insert an entire web form, right, into a site? So now this site, which is at insecurelabs.org in this case, but it could be yale.edu. And by the way, Scott and I found a insecure, or at least a site that was vulnerable to this kind of thing at Yale when we first started this class, and we're doing these examples for the library, where if you entered HTML in a certain way or JavaScript into a search form for books or articles, it would spit out this kind of stuff. You could fake a web form, you could redirect a user, you could do malicious things to a user, which we'll do last here today. You could have a legitimate looking domain that somebody else is hosting for you as an attacker. You send this URL out to somebody, you stick it in an email, phishing email that looks really fancy, you give it a nice header or something, and then maybe someone is unfortunately, silly enough to enter their Social Security number. Well, my brain today with all this stuff going on. But the point is, it's so easy to find sites like this if you spend your time all day, every day trying to attack people. And many attackers use these kinds of methods. They're not complicated to learn. And it seems a little basic because, we're giving you pre-canned examples. But once you know this, you might be surprised. There may be some pretty professional, pretty serious websites that have this kind of vulnerability. All right, so we're not going to grab anybody's soc, right? Nobody should be grabbing a soc via web form, by the way, anywhere in the world. But let's say we now combine this with information we know, the kinds of attacks we've done in the past. We've done social engineering with a fake version of Facebook, right? Let's use something on Kali called Beef XSS. And on my Kali, it was installed, but maybe on some of yours it isn't. So you might have to do sudo apt get install beef-xss. And you can skip down to the information for the notes for the class that I sent you to the section on Beef XSS and copy these commands in if you need to. Okay, so now I installed this. Beef XSS cross-site scripting is going to basically combine a cross-site scripting attack of the kind we just saw with a monitor, a daemon on the back end that's going to watch the information that the user puts in. So it's going to, gather credentials on a person. Okay, I'm going to run Beef XSS with sudo. And the first time I run it, I have to set a password. I just use B33F because it's easy. Okay, now it's going to run. You're going to see it's going to start a panel here. There's a URL here for the panel. And if I just keep waiting, it'll open it in my default browser by default. Okay, so here's my panel. I type in Beef as the username, B33F as the password. And look, I have this panel, backend panel, to monitor cross-site scripting via social engineering. You'll see there's a few demos here. This is going to be very useful for your end hacks if you decide to go this route. If you click on the advanced version, you'll see you get a demo page about buying Beef. Now, I'm going to pop this into Chromium, which I already pre-installed, but it's basically Google Chrome. You could do this, of course, on another browser on your same network, or if we faked your, a domain name, this could say whatever, beeflovers.com or something. Although who knows where that goes. And then you click order your beef, and then I put some information in, and I click bye. Okay, and now if we go back to our panel for the attacker, you'll see there's a session open here. And if we go to the logs, you'll see all the information that I just threw into that form is being logged. So the combination of cross-site scripting, right? This is another way where when you click this button, it is injecting JavaScript code into the browser on the client end. But now you've got a control panel on the back end, that an attacker is watching, in this case, gathering and scooping up that information. So SQL injection, you break databases, you get information out of it, right? Cross-site scripting, reflective attacks, just reflect information back, very useful for phishing. Those kinds of attacks combined with watching the information as it flows through the crappy application or the fake application pretending to be something else, now you're able to spy on users. And that's basically it. Thank you for your patience.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sean. That was great. I would just say we are going to, next class, talk about why all this stuff works. That is, like, why does code injection work? And we're going to get into the metaphysics of hacking, and it's going to be fun. And we're going to be doing more hacks as well. Okay, fantastic. So next week, more hacks. We will learn about the metaphysics of hacking. Come back because lots more fun stuff to do. Thank you very much. And we will see you next week. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Lawfare. And thank you, students, for making this fun.